Welcome to Status Secure, the weekly cyber threat briefing for executives who refuse to operate in the blind. Hosted by the Watcher 6 Collective, uniting former Army Special Forces and Naval Special Warfare Communications operators, alongside an industry-leading CISO nominated for Cybersecurity Woman of the World. We cut through the noise and give you the operational intelligence you need for mission success in a hostile digital environment. The enemy is listening. Is your status secure?
Welcome to Status Secure. Today's briefing targets the healthcare sector, and the target isn't your money, it's your patient data. So we constantly hear about credit card fraud, but in the underground economy, a credit card number is worth $5, but a complete medical record could be worth 1,000. And so what we're going to talk about now is why is patient data gold to these threat actors, and why is it worth so much more? And that's my first question to you, CISO. Why is this data so valuable?
Well, it's because, when you steal a credit card, you can cancel your card. You can put it on hold. You can do a lot of things. But once your health information is out there in the dark web, you cannot cancel it. You cannot, get it back. And medical history is something that is very personal to people, to folks. It can easily be used as blackmail, especially if you're a high profile individual. Also, there has been a case where they sold the medical ID for a child. And, and understandably, a father who did not have health insurance for his daughter was able to purchase that medical ID card, use it to give his daughter medical care. At first, when you hear that, you're like, what's wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with somebody getting health care for their child. But the actual person that medical ID belonged to, she was a person. She ended up getting sick later on. And because there were medical records tied to that medical ID card, she was misdiagnosed and given wrong medication. And unfortunately, she passed away because of that. So there's a lot of reasons why medical information, history, medical data is so worth more on the black market. But it has implications. But it definitely has implications.
Absolutely. And I can imagine as the person, the victim who it happened to, that's, unfortunate, and that sucks and it's terrible. And then I also can't imagine the next step beyond that of the practice, right? Who fell into that trap and kind of however that information was available, however it became available, and like whose systems did that information kind of slip out the cracks, right? So what I'm thinking is, how can we, as let's say healthcare professionals in the healthcare industry, make sure we have an environment where something like that doesn't happen? I would imagine that most administrators and CEOs or executives in the industry listening to this, maybe they've passed their HIPAA audit and they're going, hey, we're HIPAA compliant, so we're good, right? But my question to you is, does passing your HIPAA audit and being HIPAA compliant, is that going to be enough to stop something like this or to stop ransomware from happening? And what are your thoughts on that?
Wow. Actually, I have a question for you. So there are a lot of people who pass their driver's exams. Are they all safe drivers?
No.
That's just the reality. That's just paperwork. And that's just administrative stuff. You have to do it because it's the requirement. That's the minimum that you should do because it's required. No, definitely, passing a HIPAA, assessment or any kind of certification is a good beginning. Right? But really, you need to make sure that the things that you have in place are appropriate for what you're protecting, that you're doing more than what is the minimum required, that, that your administrative stuff is not where you stop, that, oh, we passed, we're good to go. That can't be where you draw the line. Your goal is not to pass an exam. Your goal is to be a safe driver. Yeah.
Yeah. And, this makes me think of here at Watcher 6, we get people coming through the door who maybe they're just putting their feelers out there to see, they know that they're coming into a phase where they need, let's say, SOC 2 compliance or HIPAA compliance. And they're kind of going, how am I going to accomplish this? And one of the things that we see is a lot of times you get people that go, I don't really care about being secure. Like, I just want to be compliant. I want the paperwork that says I'm compliant as cheap as I can possibly get it. And I feel like even in this conversation that we're having, there's the other side of that kind of that going, cutting corners or trying to be cheap, where I don't know, you could really hurt yourself down the road. And that brings me to my next question is, if you're in a healthcare system and you're curious about your security, and if you went to, let's say, like an IT director and you said, hey, and you ask them about their security posture and they said, hey, don't worry, we're compliant. What would be maybe a better question to ask so that you can have a better sense of are you secure or are you just compliant?
Well, I want to start by making a comment on something you said. You know, the question is always, do you pay now or do you pay later? And if you pay later, it's always more. So always keep that in mind. Right? Cheapest is not always going to be the less expensive over time. So that's one thing. The second thing is your question. If I was a leader right now, yes, it's nice. Are we compliant? Yes, we are. That's great. My next question would be, how are we secure? Show me what we are doing. Walk me through it, so that I can understand exactly where we are and what we're doing. Because at the end of the day, if you're the leader, you are accountable. And if you can't understand or explain what controls you have in place and how they're operating effectively, and you haven't taken the time to look at that, that's on you. So you need to make sure that you're asking your team. And it's a good way. It's actually a good way for your team to show you. Because if they're proud of the controls that they have in place, if they're proud of the things that they're doing, they will want to show you. If they're not, they'll make excuses. They'll give you excuses. Oh, we're in the middle of implementing this. We've been doing it this way, and we want to do it this way in the future. So you'll start hearing excuses. You'll start hearing, instead of, let me show you what we're doing, because I'm so proud of it.
This is making me think about, so when I served in the military, I was an Army Special Forces Green Beret, and I had some training to develop some skill sets to get into places, right, that maybe we need to get into at some point down the road. And you come across certain themes or mantras, and one of those is, maybe a lock on a door keeps an honest person honest, right? So I think of this in like 3 stages. Is like the first stage is your least secure stage, and that's where you have, let's just say you have like a shed or a house, and you've got, front door, back door, and a shed or something like that. And you don't even have locks in the doors. Sometimes people who aren't even bad people, just out of pure curiosity, are going to go in and see what's in there. And so a lot of times we would say, hey, even just like a lock on the door, I can see it visually, and it's going to keep the honest people honest. And unfortunately, some people stop there. And what you learn if you're in that world is that a lot of these locks that keep people honest are really easy to bypass. So if I'm intentional and I'm actually wanting to get into that place, and you're using basic locks and you're not really paying much attention to it, most likely it's going to be easy for me to get in. And so then that's the second phase. And then the third phase would be, okay, yes, we've checked the boxes. I put a lock on the front door. I put a lock on the back door. I put a lock on my shed. Now let's take it to the next step and go, what kind of lock am I using? Can I use a better lock? Can I use, a double lock, type system? Is there other ways I can make it secure so it's especially not easy for someone who knows what they're doing? And so that's kind of what this made me think of is you can be an organization with no security, right? And maybe even people who aren't criminals might just take something because they want to. And I don't know, they just saw it was available. Boom. Cool, I did it. Or now you're in an industry that has forced compliance on you, like HIPAA in the healthcare space. And you go, okay, you check the boxes and look, I'm compliant. See, I have locks on all my doors. And then we take it to the third phase, which is, are we actually paying attention to what locks we're using? And are we actually paying attention to maybe the log of those locks? Like, did somebody open it that wasn't supposed to? Right. And so that's kind of what you made me think of when we were talking about that. And, I would say that, we talk about data, is like ones and zeros, right? But in healthcare, a cyber attack can have a kinetic impact, and it can stop operations and it can hurt people. And so you've been on, based on just the nature of their space, right? Something goes down that could cause a life-threatening situation for somebody that needs life help, like life care to keep them alive, like someone who had a heart attack and they have a pump on their heart, and that pump, if it shuts off, that person could die, right? And so what actually happens inside a hospital when a network goes down or when there is some kind of attack that makes its way in?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of impact to a provider, to a healthcare service provider, right? To a hospital, to doctor offices. Patient care is definitely impacted by that. I heard about a story where several years ago there was a cyber attack. It took down the systems, and unfortunately, it impacted the systems in a NICU. And and so those the infants in the NICU were impacted, and I believe there was also, unfortunately a mortality risk there. I would say that, we're not just protecting privacy, right? We are protecting patient safety at this point. When you're talking about everything depends on technology, right? Doctors are depending on it, nurses are depending on it to give care, and patient lives are, especially if you're getting, if you're on a ventilator, if you're on any kind of technology that is connected to the network, those things can be severely impacted. They talked about, like, an attack on on a pacemaker, right? Where they can, like, now shut off your pacemaker and just kill you remotely. So it's very important that we think of it in terms of patient safety versus privacy. I mean, privacy is important, but patient safety should be the number one thing that we're looking at, and understanding that's the priority.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, we're coming to the tail end of this conversation, and so I'd like to just take a second here to take a step back for the both of us and ask you, on this subject, on this topic, uh, you got whether they're people who are providing the security within a healthcare organization or it's a key executive leader within a healthcare organization. What kind of advice would you give? Maybe something that's actionable or tangible, something they can take from this and look at, assess, or maybe implement kind of right away.
I would say, if you're a leader, I'm gonna give you the non-tangible first and then the tangible. Okay. So if you're a leader, you need to understand that even if you pass HIPAA, if you were to have an event, the amount of fines you would get is based on your due diligence. So if you implemented a control, but then something happened and they go and they, assess your control, and you just put something in just fast to get it there, they will say, hey, you did not do your due diligence here. You were, you could have done more. And so we're going to fine you more. So keep that in mind. The tangible thing that you can do right now is segregate your network. That is, like, a lot of times we put in a network, it grows organically, and we don't review it to really identify, like, what should be, what should be in a private, in a separate network, and, what systems should go together, and, and what data classification, like what data on each of those systems, so that way they're separated, aggregated appropriately. That's the very first thing you can do. That's tangible. Figure out your network segmentation. And, the other is immutable backups, right? If something were to happen, can you restore? Can you guarantee that your backup is not corrupted and impacted as well? You need to make sure that the money that you spend on backups is a lot. I know, especially if you have a lot of data. So make sure that you're getting your value, right? It's like you bought a diamond, you put it in the safe, but you left the code on a sticky note on top of the safe. Hey, make sure you don't do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can get busy, right? We got things to do. We got all sorts of tasks for the day, and then we have our time off and all this other stuff. And, something I just want to throw a reminder out is that the enemy or the people that are maybe targeting your patient data, they're going to be targeting it even when you're on your off time, right? Especially when there's downtime and off time and people aren't paying attention. And so we don't want to rely on that paper shield to stop a digital bullet, right? And so mission success, it's about preparation, and it's about not just being prepared, but also executing to that standard consistently, right? Knowing that the threat is constantly happening whether you're there or not. And so on that note, we're going to cut it here, and we're going to see you guys next week.
Mission success isn't about luck. It's about preparation. You've heard the intel. Now, go put it to use. If you need to verify your security posture, I've established a secure line at watcher6.com/secure. Go there to get the briefing the enemy doesn't want you to have. We'll see you next week. Until then, keep your head on a swivel.